You're a queen. The crown on your head is heavy, but it fits. Your gown trails behind you like the tail of a comet. Everywhere you walk, people bow. Eyes lower, doors open. The world moves around you like you're its centre. But somewhere, just beyond the curtain, behind the stone walls, beneath the floorboards, they're already building the place where you will die. That's the truth no one tells you about queenship. It doesn't end with the throne. It ends in a cell. You look magnificent. You sound dignified. But beneath the surface there is rot. Not in you, in them. The men who smile as they betray you. The priests who bless your executioners. The women who nod and curtsy, then whisper your name like it's a disease. They say you're too proud, too foreign, too outspoken, too barren, too beautiful, too political, too loved. Too much. Always too much. So they decide to make you less. Not with poison, not with a dagger in the dark, but with something colder, slower, something that doesn't just end you, it unravels you. First, they strip you of your dignity. Your letters are intercepted. Your jewels are confiscated. The clothes you wore at court are replaced with plain cloth and tight collars. They isolate you in towers, in convents, in drafty rooms where even the mirrors have been removed. Because queens are not supposed to look like prisoners, and prisoners are not supposed to remember who they were. Then they take your name. They stop calling you Majesty. They stop calling you Queen. Eventually they stop calling you at all. The guards refer to you as she. The servants avert their eyes. The silence becomes a wall around you, taller than the ones of any fortress. It is not enough to kill a queen. They must humiliate her first. They must bend her spine before they sever it, because queens do not die like common women. They are not left to vanish in illness or age. When a queen is sentenced, it is never just about the body. It is about erasure, about the message, about power. Your execution will be a ceremony. They will dress you in white, but it will not be for purity. They will display you before the crowd, not to honour you, but to prove that no crown is safe, that even the divine can be made to bleed. Your death will not be quick, or if it is, it will still be brutal, because even the cleanest cut carries centuries of meaning. They will choose a method that suits your myth, an axe, dull and slow, a sword, foreign and theatrical, a platform high enough to see the expressions of the people who once cheered for you. They want your final breath to taste like shame. They want your final thought to be, was I ever truly a queen? But here is what they never plan for. You remain, not in body, not in titles, but in memory, in the silence that follows a scream, in the weight of a locked door, in the way young girls are taught to speak softly, because loud women die on platforms. You are not the only one, there are others. Anne, whose eyes did not lower even when the sword was raised. Mary, who dressed in crimson to meet her fate like a queen going to war. Sophia, who spoke no final words because they had taken her voice decades earlier. You stand in a long unbroken line of women crowned and then crushed, not for crimes, but for the sin of standing tall in a world that wanted you kneeling. And now, centuries later, their names return. Not through coronations, through stories, through whispered truths, through the impossible act of remembering what history tried to bury. Because a queen's execution was never just about her death. It was about her destruction. And yet, here you are, still speaking. You see the tower long before you reach it. Its silhouette rises through the fog like something half remembered from a nightmare. You know what waits inside, and yet you keep walking. The bells do not ring. You are Anne Boleyn, Queen of England, wife to Henry VIII, mother to his daughter, and by the end of this week you will be nothing more than a problem that solved itself. They say you were arrogant, that you smiled too much, laughed too freely, that your wit was a dagger, that your ambition had no bounds, but that is not why you're here. You're here because you failed to give him a son. The man who once burned down a religion to marry you now sends you to the scaffold with the same hand he once used to cup your face. You're led through the gates with no ceremony, just boots on stone, cold air, staring eyes. The tower doesn't greet you, it swallows you. Your rooms are small, sparsely furnished. They were once royal apartments, but now, stripped bare, they feel like a tomb waiting to close. The trial is already decided before it begins. You're accused of adultery, incest, treason. The charges are absurd, designed not to prove guilt but to stain your memory. You know the men who testify. You've danced with them, dined beside them. They bow as they lie. You're not surprised. Betrayal is a language you've learned fluently. Still, the moment the sentence is read, something inside you freezes. Not fear, not grief. Something colder, a kind of stillness, as if your soul has stepped back and is now watching from the rafters. You're told you will be executed by sword, not axe. It is framed as mercy, but you understand the spectacle when you see it. This will not be a private death. It will be a pageant, a queen unmade with elegance. The days between your sentence and your execution are the longest of your life. Time stretches thin. Each hour becomes a wait. Your meals come untouched. You speak to no one except your ladies, and even then, only in whispers. You write letters that will never be delivered. You pray, not for your life, but for clarity, for a moment of grace in this engineered descent. You think of Elizabeth, your daughter, red-haired, fierce-eyed, still too young to know what the world does to women who wear crowns. You wonder who will tell her what happened. You wonder what they'll say. You hope she won't believe them. The morning arrives with pale skies and cruel precision. They dress you in a gown of dark grey. Your hair is bound up beneath a simple hood. You walk barefoot across the cold stone, each step measured, steady. The platform rises before you, surrounded by a small crowd, carefully selected. Courtiers, nobles, witnesses. No one looks you in the eye. The executioner is from Calais. Foreign, efficient. He bows before you, promising to be swift. You thank him. It is not kindness. It is controlled, because if you must die, you will do it on your terms. You kneel on the straw-covered block. You do not scream. You do not beg. You do not tremble. Instead, you speak. I die the king's faithful servant, but God's first. A sentence chosen not to clear your name, but to keep your dignity intact. Even as your body is about to be split in two, you protect the only thing they cannot take, your voice. The sword glints in the sun. The crowd holds its breath. And then, silence. Not because of what happens, but because of what they feel. Not grief, not guilt. Something worse. Recognition. They do not see a traitor. They see a woman, a wife, a mother, a queen who stood too tall for too long, and who paid the price not for what she did, but for what she represented. The blade falls clean. Your head rolls into the straw, but your eyes remain open. History would try to flatten you, turn you into a warning, a seductress, a scandal. But they never quite succeeded, because silence did not erase you. It made you louder. You became a legend not because of how you died, but because of how you stood, even when the world tried to fold you. And centuries later, the wind still moves through the tower yard, not in mourning, in memory. You were born with a crown, you died with a veil, and between those two silences they tried to turn you into everything but a woman. You are Mary Stuart, Queen of Scots, Queen Consort of France, a Catholic in a Protestant world, a royal prisoner held for 19 years. You were once the most beautiful woman in Europe. Now your beauty frightens them, because beauty in a cage becomes a prophecy. They say you plotted, they say you conspired, but before the letters, before the forged ciphers and secret signatures, before the trial that wasn't a trial, there were the years, the long cold years, the walls that watched you age, the hands that poured your wine and reported every word, The letters you wrote were read before you sealed them. 19 years, not in a dungeon, in rooms with chairs, curtains and guards outside every door. But it was still a prison, one meant not to break your body, but to unravel your name. You were not executed for treason. You were executed for reminding England of what it feared most, a queen with a claim, a queen who could bleed and still rise, a queen who smiled at the child who might take the throne. They tell you the verdict in February. You do not flinch. You have known for years how this ends. You're told you may bring 2 women with you. No priest. You're Catholic in a Protestant country. They will not let your God into the room. Only theirs. You rise early on the day of your death. You dress in scarlet silk, the colour of martyrdom. Your hair is pinned up. A golden crucifix is hidden beneath your gown. You walk with no support. You're 54 years old. Your joints ache. Your steps do not. The hall at Fotheringhay Castle is already full. Nobles, soldiers, courtiers, all arranged like pieces on a board. The block is low. Your executioners stand beside it, one clean-shaven, the other less sure. They've practised, you can tell, but not enough. You kneel, not for them, for God. You begin to pray in Latin, loudly. The room shifts, eyes dart. They try to drown you out with English psalms, but you do not stop. You raise your voice, it echoes in the rafters. They try to make it look clean, a quick strike, a silent fall. But the first blow misses, it hits the back of your head. A gasp breaks through the crowd. The second strike lands, deep, final. Your body slumps forward, but your lips are still moving. The third blow severs the last flesh. Your head falls, hair loosens from its pins. Someone reaches down to lift it. Your once royal face now bloodied but still composed. And then the wig comes away in his hands. Your real hair, grey, thin, close-cropped, falls around your shoulders, and in that moment you stop being a queen. You become a body, a cautionary tale, a trophy. But something else happens too, something no one planned for. From beneath your skirts a small terrier runs out, yipping in panic, covered in your blood. Your dog, your only constant companion in captivity, refuses to leave your body. It nestles in your gown, presses into your lifeless chest, whimpering. The room turns colder. What was meant to be a political act becomes something else, something human, something grotesque. This was not a war, not a rebellion. This was a woman's death, orchestrated like theatre, dressed like ritual, but still a killing. The audience leaves in silence. No cheers, just the sound of boots on stone. You're buried, moved, reburied, dissected by historians, vilified, romanticised. Your faith made you dangerous. Your beauty made you suspicious. Your bloodline made you expendable. But what they feared most, what they still fear, is not what you did. It's that you did not beg. That even after 19 years they couldn't silence you. That you wore scarlet to your death. That you prayed in Latin so loudly the walls still remember. That your dog refused to leave. You did not die quietly. You died like a queen. And now, centuries later, in the ruins of Fotheringhay, the wind moves strangely. It howls louder through the broken windows. It brushes against the stones like fingers searching for something lost. Sometimes, they say, it sounds like a prayer. Not all queens are victims. Some wear the crown not as a halo, but as a blade. You're no longer in Europe. No velvet gowns, no Christian saints, no scaffold. This is Han China, and the queen is Empress Lu. She is not remembered for dying. She's remembered for the way she made others die. You will not hear her name spoken gently. You will not find romance in her legend. There are no love letters, no weeping portraits, only silence and fear, and the sharp echo of what power looks like when it sheds every illusion of mercy. She was once the consort of Emperor Gaozu, the founder of the Han dynasty. But when he died, She did not fade into the background like other imperial widows. She stepped forward and took control. She ruled behind the curtain, officially as regent, unofficially as empress in all but name. And when her power was questioned, when rivals circled, when threats emerged, she didn't crush them in battle. She crushed them slowly. One of them was Lady Qi, a rival concubine, a favoured beauty, a woman who had done nothing but love the same man and bear him a son. That was enough. Lu ordered her seized, not executed. That would be too quick, too clean, too forgettable. Instead, she was transformed. They called it the human pig. Lady Qi's limbs were cut off, her eyes gouged out, her tongue sliced, her ears were removed. She was dosed with medicine to keep her alive and then locked in a pigsty, mute, blind, limbless, breathing. What was done to her was not death. It was erased, not of the body but of the identity. Lu did not want her gone. She wanted her unmade, to become something that could not be remembered as queen or consort or woman, to be reduced to a shape of flesh so grotesque it could never again be seen as political. Her son was executed shortly after, because queens who seek vengeance rarely stop with the mother. Centuries later, historians still debate whether the story is myth, propaganda, or truth. But the record in the Zizhi Tongjian is precise, clinical, undeniably human in its horror, and what makes the cruelty unbearable is not the act itself. It's that a woman ordered it. It's that someone who once wore silk and pearls knew exactly what it meant to be erased, and chose to inflict that fate on another. Because perhaps no one knows how to destroy a queen better than a queen who's been told her own power is temporary. Lu wanted more than obedience. She wanted obedience dressed as fear, and she got it until the day she died. When her body was barely cold, her enemies rose. Her clan was wiped out. Her name cursed in court documents, painted as a symbol of unnatural female power. But even her enemies could not erase the shadow she cast. You do not forget the hand that touched the wheel of the empire and squeezed until it splintered. You do not forget the queen who ruled not with softness, but with strategy soaked in blood. She was not executed. She was not betrayed. She was not broken. You don't need a sword to destroy a queen. Sometimes all it takes is silence. You're Ankhesenamen, daughter of Nefertiti, wife of King Tutankhamun. You were born royal, raised in a world of painted walls and golden thrones, where God spoke through bloodlines and eternity was written in stone, and yet you disappeared. No grave, no tomb, no body, no name. You were Queen of Egypt, and then nothing. They remember your husband, the boy king whose coffin glitters in museums, the young pharaoh whose face still gazes out from death with perfect symmetry. But beside him there is only absence. Your name was once etched beside his. But somewhere, somehow, someone chiselled it away, not with violence, with intention. Your execution did not come with a blade. It came with erasure. Tutankhamun died young, barely 18, and with his death, your world collapsed. You were left alone in a court filled with men who saw your womb as the last doorway to power. They wanted your bloodline, your name, your signature on their claim. You wrote to the Hittites, a foreign enemy, begging for help. You asked for a prince to marry, swearing you would take no other. That letter still survives. It is real. Ink on papyrus, desperation preserved. It was a dangerous plea. Treason, some called it. A woman seeking her own future, choosing her own alliance. The Hittite prince was sent. He never arrived. Assassinated, most believe. And you? You vanish from the record. One day you're the most powerful woman in Egypt. The next, you're gone. Your titles were stripped, your lineage blurred. The walls that once bore your image were plastered over. Later kings took your place. Later queens stole your titles. and the priests with their careful ink and measured hieroglyphs rewrote you out of history. To the ancient Egyptians, death was not the end. Oblivion was, and you were sentenced to it. That was your execution, not of body, but of identity. Not buried in the sand, but in forgetfulness. You may have been forced into another marriage. You may have died in childbirth. You may have been imprisoned, silenced, veiled, buried in a tomb without a name. No one knows, and that is cruelty. To erase a queen so completely that even the gods might forget her. But something remained. A ring with your name beside Tut's. A letter written in your own words. A gap in history that refuses to close. And in that gap, you still speak. Not loudly, not clearly, but enough. Enough to remind the world that your voice was once heard. That you stood beside a king, not behind him. That you tried to carve a future with your own hand, and for that they made you disappear. But the truth has a way of breathing beneath stone, and even erased queens leave shadows. Not every execution has a date. Some happen slowly, quietly. So gradually that even the victim begins to forget where it began. You are Isabella of France, daughter of a king, wife of a king, mother of a king. They called you the she-wolf. They blamed you for a civil war, for a lover, for daring to seize power in a world that demanded queens stay ornamental. You weren't executed. You were buried alive in time. You married Edward II of England when you were 12. He preferred his favourites, men who whispered in his ear, who rode beside him in battle, who shared his chambers and his trust. You watched from the edges, beautiful, foreign, ignored. At first, you endured. You bowed. You smiled. You played the part. But queens who wait long enough learn something terrible. Patience is a kind of weapon, and you used it. You aligned with his enemies. You led an invasion. You overthrew your husband with your lover, Roger Mortimer, at your side. You ruled in your son's name, and then everything turned. Your son, Edward III, came of age. He seized power. Mortimer was executed, hung like a traitor, his body left for the crows. And you were not killed. That would have made you a martyr. Instead, he locked you away. No charges, no trial, no blood, just stone walls, guards at the door, and decades. Your titles were stripped. Your letters were censored. Your name was spoken less and less. You lived in Castle Rising, surrounded by gardens and silence. You walked the grounds like a ghost. Occasionally visitors came, diplomats, courtiers. They said you looked well. But they didn't ask questions. You were not seen in public. You were not allowed to write freely. You were not invited to court. Your son sent you a pension, but not his presence. The world moved on. They called it comfortable. They called it mercy. But they had forgotten what you once were. A queen who had toppled a king, a woman who had ruled a kingdom, and now reduced to flower beds and servants who spoke in hushed tones. Your punishment was not death. It was an observation. A life lived behind curtains. A queen turned into a shadow in her own country. You died in 1358. No scaffold, no final speech. Just a quiet room, a slow breath. A body too tired to keep standing. And yet, the silence that killed you left cracks. The she-wolf still haunts history, not as a monster, but as a mirror. A reminder that power taken by a queen is never forgotten and never forgiven. The punishment was not death, it was forgetting. You're Sophia Dorothea of Celle, wife to the future King of England, mother to kings and queens, once dressed in diamonds, once painted in oils, and then one day your name was no longer spoken. They said you betrayed your husband, that you wrote letters to another man, that you dreamed of love in a palace where love was forbidden. You did not raise an army. You did not conspire against the crown. You fell in love. And that was enough. They arrested your lover, Count Königsmarck. The next morning he was gone. No trial, no body. only a blood-stained floorboard and a silence no servant dared disturb. Then they came for you. No executioner, no verdict. Just a carriage with dark curtains and a destination no one told you. You were 33. They took you to Alden Castle, a house turned into a grave. It was not cold, it was not cruel, but it was still a prison. There were no locks on the doors because there was nowhere to go. You were not allowed to see your children again. Not even once. You asked. You begged. You wrote letters no one answered. Your son, the future George II, grew up calling you dead. And in many ways, you were. The rooms were quiet, your title stripped. Your name was removed from court records. Your face was painted out of family portraits. The servants called you the lady, but never queen. You walked the halls for years, skirts brushing the same stones, eyes watching the seasons change through glass. The silence pressed harder with every passing decade. 30 years. That's how long you remained there. Long enough for the world to forget why you were locked away. Long enough for your body to bend, your voice to falter, your memory to soften at the edges. But you never confessed. You never begged for forgiveness. You refused to let them rewrite the ending. They wanted a scandal to vanish. You gave them a silence they could not own. You died in 1726 at 60, alone, buried without ceremony. Your family did not come. No crown, no cortege, no eulogy, just a name they tried not to say. But the castle still stands, and sometimes, just sometimes, visitors say they hear footsteps. Soft, deliberate, pacing along upper corridors. A woman who was never allowed to leave, not through doors, not through death. It was never just about the body. These queens weren't executed simply to end their lives. They were unmade, ritually, strategically, with patience and cruelty disguised as process. Some were led to platforms, their necks bared to the blade, their names already buried beneath false charges. Some were locked in towers, in palaces, in silence. Left alive, but hollowed out. Some were erased from walls, their faces scraped from tombs, their letters burned, their legacies renamed. Some were broken slowly, their memories softened by the long grind of time, by the suffocation of exile dressed in velvet. But all of them were destroyed in ways designed to last, because a queen doesn't die when her heart stops beating. A queen dies when her story is taken from her, when her voice is replaced with someone else's version, when her final scream is rewritten as a whisper, when she is remembered not for what she fought, but for what they say she failed to do. And that was always the point, to turn power into punishment, to make an example of defiance, to take a woman crowned by blood or marriage and reduce her to myth, or nothing at all. But here's the part they never controlled. What came after? Anne's head fell, but her name didn't. Mary's body collapsed, but her dog stayed by her side. Anka Cinnamon vanished, but her handwriting survived. Sophia Dorothea's lips went still, but the corridors of her prison still echo with unseen steps, and in every story there's a moment where the queen looks up, at her executioner, at her accusers, at her husbands, at history, and she does not flinch. That is what survived. Not the crown, not the dress, not the blood, the refusal, the quiet, searing defiance of women who were supposed to break, and didn't. You're standing now, in the place where they died. Maybe it's the tower. Maybe it's a shuttered wing of a forgotten palace. Maybe it's only in your mind. But if you listen, if you breathe slowly, you can feel it. The stone remembers, the silence remembers, and somewhere, across the centuries, they still stand. Not as queens, but as women who endured the worst history could invent and dared to be more than its victims.